Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Mark Walmsley, excuse me, and he is are you the head of the Arts and Culture Network? Is that your thing?
Yes, I'm the founder and director, or as I describe it, the chief culture vulture at
Ooh,
the
I like that.
Arts and Culture Network. Yes, that's right, Ed. Thank you for inviting me on. This is great.
My pleasure. So what is the Arts and Culture Network?
It's a growing global community of over 120,000 professionals and enthusiasts working across all of the arts, culture, and creative industries. And we have 8 LinkedIn groups, which is where those 120,000 are. And I host a series of random speed networking events for those members to connect, start conversations, and explore opportunities for collaboration. And for those who want a bit more support, we have a full membership program where we provide additional opportunities for promotion, profile development, career development, and business development. So yeah, it's a single-handed labor of love with the help of my trusty assistant Isabel, who's here as well. So yeah, that's the Arts and Culture Network.
So what is the scope of arts in that and culture? What is the scope that you are appealing to?
It's a nice mix. We're global, so it typically 30% North America, 30% Europe, 30% rest of the world. It's a nice mix between the practitioners and the creators of art and those who support them, like specialist copywriters or designers, for example. But it's performing arts, visual arts, literary arts, GLAM, which is galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, and lots of musicians and actors and composers. And yeah, it's a broad church.
Wow. Wow, that's fantastic. How long have you been doing this?
I started it in 2010 when LinkedIn allowed you to start a group on on their platform, and then promptly forgot all about it. I often say I wish I'd done the same with Bitcoin back then, but
Yeah.
there you go. And it grew on its own, really. And I looked at it again when we were approaching lockdown and realized there were 18,000 members, but not much interaction. So I thought, well, let's get people together. Let's start taking the group a bit more seriously. So that's what we did. Started hosting events on Zoom because people get that now. And I can't get 100 arts and culture professionals from all over the world together for an hour any other way. So, and we've had some marvelous success stories. We've had people hired during their 5-minute speed meetings. We've had artists collaborate on digital gallery shows from 3 continents. We've had a young Indian girl, Anjali. She was studying in Connecticut from her home in India, and she hadn't been able to secure a role, so her student visa was expiring. She came to one of our meetings, met Jenny Leggery, who's a marketing specialist in the States, got hired, and cancelled her flight home 36 hours later. So yeah, it's lovely when I hear the success stories, opportunities and that wouldn't have been possible had I not made the crazy decision to start this group. But my days are like a world tour on Zoom in 15-minute chunks at the moment, as you can imagine. So,
Well, you have two areas that are very interesting to me. One is the arts and culture area, but this networking area is even more provocative to me. And let me describe the way I perceive this and let you respond to what I'm describing. So we have lived in a world of where we're kind of trapped in the institutional structures of where we live, and those have not really supported us reaching beyond the boundaries of those structures. But with the use of our phones, wherever my phone is, we have been able to begin to reach out beyond and to find people who are of similar perceptions and perspectives and values all over the world. So this whole thing of networking is not about how you become a global citizen, but it's rather how do you become a part of someone else's local community. That's the way I'm viewing this. And I suspect that this is what's happening with you, is that the local community of, say, visual artists in some part of South America can have someone from the UK or from America join their little group and have some kind of sense of contribution to that local group of artists, because they're sharing ideas and they're encouraging one another and building relationships that transcend geography.
Yeah, very much the case. There's a golden thread running through our community of mutual support, an undeniable passion for the importance of the arts and culture in our various societies, and that binds us all together. I had a conversation with one of our members, and she said that in her opinion, the traditional institutions of belonging were starting to fail us. I think she meant nationalities, borders,
Yeah,
it's political parties, organized religions, but that sense of and that drive for belonging remains. But with the opportunities that the internet has provided us with reaching and communicating with people in all over the world, those communities don't have to be local anymore. It's kind of like a new local.
yeah.
You know, it's always fascinating to me when I host one of our events. I say, please check in the chat and tell us where you're coming from, and you read through it afterwards, and it's incredible. And it's generally believed that in the creative industries, 85% of opportunities start with a referral, and in order to be on the receiving end of those referrals, you need ideally to have a network of people around you who understand your value and the work that you do, but that network doesn't necessarily need to be local like it used to be. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the organization BNI. It's the largest, the largest networking organization in the world, and I was a member back in '99, and I remember the meetings that we would have at the local golf course. All the referrals were in the room. We didn't know where the next door chapter was, let alone who was in it. There was no cross-chapter referring going on. It was all done on paper. And, you know, trying to refer to a different group in the organization was actively discouraged because you couldn't track those referrals. But now it's very different. I can reach out to arts and culture professionals in BNI anywhere in the world, and arguably, provided my languages are strong enough, I can start those relationships and those conversations. And it's similar on LinkedIn. It's you know, and McKinsey, I think the consulting group McKinsey published a paper last year, and they suggested that community was the big marketing idea of the decade. And I think they're right. You know, Seth Godin, I think, would say, don't find an audience for your product, find a product for your audience. And so, yeah, the importance of networking globally, if you can work globally, is, and then I can't remember who coined the phrase, but today your net worth is your network. And I think that's right.
I totally agree. And that's been my experience with this podcast. You know, I began it last year just as a way to demonstrate how to network. So, you know, you come on, you were introduced to me by Jill Tiny, you know, and so I sent you an invitation, and you're going to introduce me to some people. And so that, who do you know that you think I should know and would you introduce us, is really the secret, you know, and I've practiced that my entire career. But I think it's now become the superpower of everyone's business, because if you can get a referral, if you can get an introduction, then you have some credibility because that person believes in you enough to introduce you to someone that they trust.
Yeah.
And that's really, and I think for people who are in fields where so much of what they do is individual, I mean, the painter, the musician, they're spending a lot of time by themselves creating, and to be able to have that network of where they can refer and they can ask, well, if you're a musician, who is it that I need to meet who can do some sound engineering for me, that sort of thing. And that to me is it's just not a good idea. This is, I think, going to create a global culture that is difficult to stymie.
Yeah. I've just scribbled down the phrase, the connection divide. I think when something big happens to us, it leaves some behind. I've often heard the phrase, are you a digital native or a digital immigrant? I'm a digital immigrant. I didn't have the only computer in my school was on the secretary's desk. So I've had to learn it. Today it's taught. And so you have something of a divide there going on. I think the same thing is happening at the moment with AI, in that some people just can't be bothered to learn something new. And it's not that straightforward, but others will be perfectly comfortable using it, and that will create something of a divide as well. I think community and networking is in a similar vein, really, because if you're stuck on your own with very few connections, and if the vast majority of opportunities are helped along at least by connections, you're being deprived of those opportunities.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, for the vast majority of us, whether we're business people, artists, entrepreneurs, the single biggest challenge for most of us, in my view, is that insufficient numbers of people even know we exist. Okay, and insufficient numbers of the right people, and it's very costly to create awareness out if you're not networking. You've got to advertise, you've got to do huge amounts of search engine optimization, you've got to do PR or the other things, and that all comes at a cost. If you can develop around you, as I have, a significant number of people who know what you do and what you're all about. I mean, it happens to me all the time. Oh, you need to speak to Mark Walmsley. That's the whole point of doing it, and that's then inbound. And referrals are a wonderful thing in that respect, because the person making the referral is effectively lending you their reputation, because that travels along with you. So you're not like, you've got to take care of that. But referred and opportunity is absolutely known to be easier to close, less price sensitive because it's a referral from a trusted source, and much more likely to produce repeat business or recurring revenue. Yeah. And that's why it's increasingly important, and that's why I started the Arts and Culture Network, because I'm a furious networker and have been for many years, and I just wanted to help others along in that, and the members of our Arts and Culture Network have that opportunity now.
So at the core of the whole idea of networking is a belief in that relationships matter and that they're central to all the endeavors that we take on in life.
Yeah. I read somewhere recently that on average, a new customer, partner, or contact will need typically between 7 and 12 interactions with a new organization or person before they'll commit. Now, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem is most sales and marketing people give up after 3.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an awful lot of money being left on the table. And my motto, if you like, on LinkedIn is keep giving until they give back. And that's the way I like to operate on. I'm not going to pitch something at you over a LinkedIn message. I'll let you know of an opportunity to meet some people for free, and I shall put the relevant links in the signature. But I'm not going to try and sell you full membership. I want to meet you, start that relationship, and then if this fits for you, then perfect.
I think what we're beginning to see is that the world is increasingly transparent. You can't hide anything. You can't lie effectively any longer. I mean, we all know who are the liars in the world, and we also know who are truthful, not because there is some kind of factual truth, but they're true in how they seek to relate to people. I think that's the difference, and that, when we treat one another with respect, we build the trust that is needed for the relationship to extend into the future. And I see that that's a growing desire on people's part. They want to be known. And so they're willing to be transparent if they believe that other person respects them and is willing to engage them in conversation, or engage them in a relationship where there's trust and mutuality involved.
Yeah, that trust is the key word there, and it's trusting somebody to do a great job, trusting the referral, and once you've developed that, there are brands out there that seem to have that.
Yes.
I have a program that I use in my capacity as a brand and marketing consultant called PARELA. It's an anagram, not an anagram, it's an acronym, PARELA. It actually is a Brazilian boy's name called Breathing Spirit, which is rather nice. But
nice.
in my world, it's the chronology of customer engagement. And it starts with perception, then it goes to awareness, and then recall, and then engagement, and then loyalty, and then advocacy. And arguably, brands like Nike, Harley Davidson, Apple, they've made it all the way to the end. Apple could double the cost of a MacBook Pro and slash their marketing, and they'd still sell a hell of a lot and have a viable business.
Yeah.
That's an unusual place to be, and that's because there are people like me who won't go near a PC because they enjoy that experience and like being aligned to it. Most of us are stuck at awareness. Some of us have got the perception right. So if your proposition is if you're different, better, and remarkable, you'll be noticed, remembered, and talked about. And so that's the place to start. As Seth Godin tells us, if you're not different, you're invisible these days. So awareness is the challenge. And then once you've made, and there are a number of ways of doing that, and networking is one of them. But then it's important to keep in touch with people and keep reminding them and bring them up and say, how are you doing? In those circumstances. And then you get to engagement, which is where they part with something, ideally their money. So you've reached the top of the hill, and down the other side of the hill is loyalty and advocacy. And it's difficult to get there. Most of us are stuck at awareness, simply the fact that not enough of the right people know you exist. And that's the challenge.
The R is recall, right?
The R is recall. Yeah. The capacity for somebody who you've reached out to remember you when they need you.
This is really good.
Thank you. I've often done this. You're driving along saying, where should we go for lunch on Sunday? What was that place that we passed and we said we must come and visit? Now, if they had a bright pink elephant outside their shop, right, you'd have remembered it. It's whatever you can do for recall. But the perception side of things fascinates me. I'd love to do a quick quiz on you, if I might. Ed, is that all right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to name 3 brands, And without asking any questions, and that's the hard bit, I'd like you to consider whether you could ever become an advocate for that brand.
Okay.
Okay. The first brand is Revlon. The second brand is Gretsch. And the third brand is Audi, A-U-D-I. Okay. Now, I think you can speak again now, by the way. I think you did 5 things almost subconsciously. I think the first question you asked was, do I get it? Do I know what product or service they provide?
Excuse me.
The second, so I imagine I imagine you know that Revlon is a cosmetics company.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's
I imagine you know that Audi is a car company.
yes.
Do you know what Gretsch make or
It's a
sell?
musical instrument company.
Absolutely. Had you not known that, you couldn't have moved
But
on.
guess from the name. That's right.
Yeah.
But
So I've got you for all 3, which is great. But the second question I think you ask is it relevant to me? So unless I'm very much mistaken, you're not wearing cosmetics. So I would think Gretsch and Revlon remain relevant. If you're not a musician, then Gretsch is not relevant. So you couldn't necessarily become an advocate for that brand. Audi, I assume you drive. So it's you get it and it's relevant. Now, stage 3 is where it gets really interesting, because I think you subconsciously placed that brand in what I call the ladder of comparative worth. So it might have been right up there, winning the Super Bowl. It might have been down here, sort of mid-table, or it might be threatened with relegation at the bottom compared to other makes. Now, I don't know where you would put Audi, in the top 10%, bottom 10%, but you will have made that decision, and it will impact on whether you could become an advocate, I think. Where would you place Audi?
okay, I would let me describe how I've processed that. The first question that I'm asking is, do I know someone who uses Revlon? Do I know someone who plays a Gretsch guitar? Do I know someone who is driving an Audi? I drive a Volkswagen, so the internal works of an Audi and the Volkswagen are very similar. And they're working off similar platforms. So I want to know, you see, because my orientation is not to the products themselves. My orientation is to the social environment, the relational environment. Because I want to, so for me, Revlon matters not because I wear makeup, but because I'm interested in skincare. You know, that's so I have a connection to it, but it's not direct. As far as Gretsch, I know that people like Gretsch, people like Les Paul guitars, they like Martin guitars, they like these different. And why I want to know this, why this is interesting, is not because I'm looking to purchase those things, but because when I know more about them and I have an opinion about them, it makes it easier for me to engage in conversation with people for whom those products really do matter.
Yeah, I love that. That's fascinating. But I think one of the things that I'm fascinated about is where this perception comes from.
Oh, yeah.
So I used to do a talk around brand perception, and I would have everybody, I would ask everybody in the room, this was before Tesla, okay?
Yeah.
I would ask everybody in the room to think of what they consider to be the safest make of car on the market, okay? And 80%, I know because I got them to stand up. I said, please stand up if you thought Volvo, okay?
Yeah. Stone one.
Yeah, that's their calling card, right? So everybody got up. So 80%, there were 100 people in the room, 80 people stood up because they said Volvo. I said, please remain standing if you've ever owned a Volvo. So a lot of people sit down.
Yeah.
Right. I've never owned a Volvo. Have you owned a Volvo?
Yes.
You have. Okay.
I had one for 15 years.
Right. And then, so I might have 20 people standing. So I then say, right, please remain standing if you've ever had a bad accident in a Volvo, and you lose pretty much everyone. Great. So of the 100 people here, only 2 of you believe Volvo is the safest car on the market from personal experience, right? So where is that perception coming from for the rest of you? It's the marketing about side impact protection systems. It's the first seat belt. It's the it's all of the things that they've been told has gone in and helped. Now, the reason I did the brand, actually, Volkswagen is a statistically, the Volkswagen Golf is safer than a Volvo, and so we're all being hoodwinked.
The contemporary versions of these.
Yeah. But the reason I found, do stop me if I go on, but I'm on a bit of a roll. The reason I came up with that 5 steps thing about Revlon, Gretsch, and Audi was I was on the way back from a meeting in Paris, going to London on the train, and was sitting opposite a young lady who was tucking into the champagne and making notes. And I thought, that's a bit odd. So inevitably, when you're one-to-one, you end up chatting. And I said, sorry, do you mind me asking, you know, why? She thought, I'm so sorry. I'm the UK manager for Pommery Champagne. Okay. Now, I did then exactly what you just did. I went through those steps. Yes, I get it. It's champagne. Yes, it's relevant. But I got stuck at 3. I don't know whether I'd be considered a chump ordering this at a restaurant or a connoisseur. I don't know, because I haven't got that hook for you.
You don't have the engagement. Yeah.
Yeah. So she told me the story of Louise Pommery, who in the 19th century was widowed by the owner of a vineyard, her husband, and she had a legal battle to keep control of it from his brother. She found some caves in Rheims in France that were exactly the right temperature to age champagne, and she excavated those at huge expense. It was the largest construction project in the 19th century to that date in France. She created Pommery champagne. She invented Brut as a type of champagne, and she was extremely successful, and she was the first woman to receive a state funeral in France. In the 1890s. And I looked at Sarah, the girl from Pommery, and I said, why don't I know this? Okay, this is the smart woman's champagne. That's your identifying characteristic. It won't stop me from drinking it. It'll give me a good story to tell if I'm asked, you know. And if you go to the Pommery website now, it's all about her. But I can't claim all the credit by any means. But that's what's so important about having that identifying characteristic, something that that people can latch onto.
Well, there's a story there that matters, that is expressing a set of values that people can connect to, and they begin to identify themselves with those values, and therefore with the product itself.
Yeah, same with Harley Davidson, same with Apple. You know, I want people to feel as though I think differently. I want people to think that I'm aligned with the kind of smart character that Steve Jobs was. Same with Harley Davidson does the same thing. You know, it's a kind of, I've owned one, so I know what it feels like. You know, it's a kind of an extension. It is a natural extension of the way you want people to perceive you. So,
you know, this is what Marshall McLuhan said, that the technology and these objects are really the extensions of man. These are they're extending us into other places and actually into relationships we have with other people. These are connection points. These are things that bind us together. You know, you see it in the fandom of English football. You know, the rabid fans of, or if you see it in the Serbian basketball leagues, where in those stadiums they're so rabid, fanatical fans. But that's what you're talking about, you know.
Yeah, it's in that respect, it's a bit like tribes. And again, I think
Of
Seth
course.
Godin wrote about those, that sense of
Yeah.
tribes. But to take that story a little bit further around personal branding and marketing. So once you've got your proposition right and your no-brainer, there is this thing. Forgive me if I'm repeating myself. I will do warn me, but I once met a young lady at a networking event, and I said, "What do you do?" And she did this. She said, "I count other people's money." And she's an accountant, right? But she's clearly a very creative accountant. I giggled, she giggled, we're off. But it's finding a way in those circumstances of creating that cognitive dissonance that gets people asking more about what you do is really a superpower. My wife's a forensic accountant. My friend is a preventative osteopath. Another friend is an oceanic artist. Now those are the operator words that get people saying, "Wait, what? I kind of get that, but tell me more."
Differentiating them from the other people who are simply artists or simply accountants.
Exactly that. Yeah. So once you've nailed that proposition and it's strong and powerful, the other thing I've been working on with some of our members is the concept of minimalist marketing. And it's inspired by Seth Godin, find your smallest viable audience and become the best option for it. I suggest people imagine they have 3 buckets in front of them and they can only put one thing in each bucket. In the first bucket goes one very specific product or service. Ideally, your favorite one that's the most fun, the most profitable, and most likely to lead to repeat or referred revenue in the first bucket. Second bucket is your smallest viable audience for that product or service. Location, job title, organizational type, industry, that kind of thing. And in the third bucket is where it gets both terrifying and liberating in equal measure. You're only allowed to use one channel to reach those people, to tell them about that product or service. Now, arguably, we should all be doing this anyway. But the key is to set targets, and you can't add anything to a bucket until you've hit those targets. And because I've noticed that many of us, myself included, are often doing this. Too many products and services across too many audiences, across too many channels, such that we're not breaking the surface anywhere significantly. So my approach in that is the Apollo 11 approach. But once you've hit those targets, and you will, because it's so focused on the best possible thing that you have for the people who need it the most, where they live, you can then add something to a bucket. So you either add a product or service to the same audience in that channel, or any combination of those 3 things. And it works for me, and it's worked for some of the people I've helped out. So that's and kind of I apply these principles to the Arts and Culture Network. We don't do anything on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere other than LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is our wheelhouse, and that will remain the case. And when I've got 200 people joining the groups every day, why would I advertise on Facebook? So, right. Yeah. So that's the philosophy.
What you're describing is very, very helpful to me as I've gone through the process of creating this podcast. And when I started, I just wanted to talk to people, and I didn't want it to be a place of simply a promotion. I've been on a bunch of podcasts before, and I found them all very boring. I don't listen to many podcasts because I find them boring. It's just they're droning on about their self-importance. And what I wanted to do was meet people and find interesting people who have no notoriety, no celebrity, but really matter in the small defined worlds that they exist in. And I wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to sign up, which was, there's no prep. We're going to have an hour and you don't have to prepare anything. We'll just talk about whatever we want to talk about. And it was that simple. And about halfway through last year, people began saying things to me, saying things to me about how important this was. This is really important. I said, why? What? And, you know, I'm just having a conversation. He says, it's because it's unscripted. This is an unscripted. It is an unscripted conversation, man. And so at the end of the year, I sent a survey out to all my guests. You know, and we're talking 80, 85, 86 guests from last year. And I just asked 5, you know, was it a good experience? Would you like to come on again, et cetera? And who do you know that you think I should know because they would be a good person to interview? And boom, within about 3 weeks, I had over 30 names of people to interview. And so they're seeing something there that I can't see it because of where I sit, but they see something there which is really valuable. And the question is, as you described these buckets, where do I go to get into the second bucket or the third bucket? Those are the questions that I wouldn't say dominate my thinking, but are present in my mind as I do go through this.
I forgive me, but I don't know the underlying business model for your podcast, whether it's the extent to which it's a revenue generating operation or a publishing labor of love. Right?
It's just a labor of love.
Well, perfect.
I've never known. Frankly, I've never known how to make money. I'm more interested in people, more interested in relationships.
Yeah, and often if you have that approach, the money follows, right? Which is great. But that gives you a blank canvas to do. You know, if satisfaction would be hearing people, increasing numbers of people listening, subscribing, commenting, and thanking you for bringing that conversation into the light, then then you have a slightly different approach to those buckets than you might do if you were answering to shareholders. Right?
I would love to make money off this, but let me add another piece to this. So this started actually 2 years ago when I went on Substack for the first time, and it was such a liberating place because I could write and do whatever I wanted to do. So over the first year, I wrote over 200,000 words. I mean, that's 40 books, you know, and the numbers, the trend line on the subscribers, most of them free, not all, but most are free, was I doubled in a year. And that told me, okay, there's something going on here. It's time to start the podcast. And so now it's, you know, I'm at that point where it's about to get away from me because I can see the day when there's so many people like you to interview that it really needs to go into syndication and become a 5-day-a-week event. Yeah. There are that many people out there to interview. Yeah.
And I think there is applying the branding approach and the positioning approach. If the it's from the ones I've listened to, you're finding hidden gems of expertise and experience.
Absolutely.
Right. That aren't Gary Vaynerchuk, that aren't Tony Robbins, right? That aren't those
Seth Godin
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, there are gems of insight out there. And I think what you're doing wonderfully is providing your listeners with an opportunity to tap into some of that hidden expertise that hasn't yet done the sofa on the television, hasn't yet done the 5-day course for 5.
Well, if we come back to your original comments about your networking and what you've been doing with Arts and Culture Network and how you have grown, well, all those people, all those 120,000 people that are in your network should be on this podcast. Because every one of them has a story. Every one of them, we could take them through that PARELA model. Every one of them has something like that. See, that's what I think we've missed in the world because we've been so focused on the heroic CEO.
Mm,
Most CEOs are not heroic. They're good managers, but they're really heroic. You know, a lot of these artists are heroic.
yeah.
They're
You've reminded me of an anecdote. I think it was the company Bryant and May who make matchboxes, that striking matchboxes, in the north of England. They were going through some difficulty. I don't know where the source is for this, and it may have grown in the telling, but it's a great story. They were going into, they were having financial difficulty. So the managing director put out a call for anyone in the organization who had any ideas how we can save money and make money. Okay. None of the directors could come up with anything. They tried it all. They had approached it as experts, and that reduced their thought processes, right? One of the youngest people in the company knocked on the door of the managing director's office, walked in with a matchbox, Bryant and May matchbox, which, by the way, is an engineering achievement because it has to be tight enough to not fall out, but loose enough to be able to push and stay there. Yeah, it's a great thing. And he asked the question, why do we have the striking paper on both sides? And the managing director just thought, why do we? Why do we put this expensive striking paper on both sides? And the boy said, if you don't do that, you could put advertising on the other one.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you know, but it came from the least likely source, you know. So so that's analogous to your suggestion that actually it's not necessarily the TV gurus you need to be listening to. It's not, I mean, Seth is great, but it's not, there's more out there. And arguably, and this is something Seth Godin does really well, he's talking common sense, but in a language that works. That's what he's doing. And there are people like the Matchbox guy that we need to hear from, you know.
Well, here's the thing. We've lived through a couple hundred years of a business climate which is very mechanical, very structured, and it's not structured around creativity. It's structured around efficiency. But we're moving out of that, and now the relationship factor matters, and we are discovering people who have something to offer, and we're gonna celebrate that. So it's a very interesting time, and the relationship side of this is really key. So I'm not chasing numbers. While I'm glad that I'm almost to 900 subscribers, it doesn't really mean anything as a number. What means something is all those people who comment, who reach out to me, who are reading what I write and listening and watching what I'm producing. That's what matters. And when they speak back to me, that is really what matters. So I should be in your arts and culture network because I see this as a form of art, is what this is really about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you'd be a very welcome member, and you'd get the chance to address them all, which is great. No, I think what you're doing is fantastic. I've never, sadly, found the time to do my own podcasts. I admire people who can sustain them because I know it's time consuming, and it's not easy to monetize. Which is why I'm delighted to be a guest when I have the opportunity to. But no, I think it's great.
It's you have to be passionate, you have to love it, and it has to be such a thing that feeds you, feeds you. So I want to go one other direction before we're finished. I want to talk about where the world of arts and culture, but in particular art, what do you envision the future of art's impact upon the world being? Because I see it's changing. I see change happening, and that one of the places that has an opportunity to really make a difference that matters are people who are artists, who are creatives. So from your perspective, what do you see there? What is your word to or advice to people who are self-identifying, I'm an artist or I'm a creative? What is it that you say to them about their value to the world in the future?
That's a great question. I'm not an artist and I'm not an art specialist. I'm a networker, and with a sympathy and an empathy with many of the people in our sector, which globally is underrated as a force for good. But I think AI is going to cause problems, continue to cause problems. Somebody famously won a digital art competition with something that was produced in AI and nobody noticed. It was intended for artists who create the work by hand but do so on a tablet. And he didn't do that. He just went to Midjourney and said, do this. And that will always be a challenge. But ironically, I think what we'll find is that once things settle, once the dust settles a bit and it's embedded into the digital landscape, I think it can only heighten the perceived value of human-generated, emotional-driven works of art.
Mm-hmm.
By its very nature, all AI can do is create something new based on things that already exist. ChatGPT has read all the books that are available in print, right? Informing itself, and it does a great job for some things. It can write poetry, but it's not. It can only write poetry based on what has already been written.
It's derivative.
It's not bringing anything else to the party, right? At this level of AI, okay. But even if it was doing something like that, it's still doing it based on what some human has done it in the past. It's all it's doing is making a replica of that so that you can pass that off. So, for example, my 16-year-old son needs a synopsis of Macbeth, right? Yeah, he could do that in ChatGPT, but it's the product of other people's existing synopses of Macbeth that you'll get with words in a different order, and that has its place, but that's not making any connection between my son Jack and the story of Macbeth,
right? And
having that produce something original. That's not happening, and that will always be the case. So this kind of originality, AI would not have produced Guernica. Picasso did that, right?
Yeah.
It
can now because Guernica exists.
It can now, yeah. You'll get something like it.
It's not going to create it from de novo.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you can put it in the prompt. Make this look a bit like Guernica by Picasso, and it will, right? You can do it. So I think that the future of great art produced by humans is safe and always will be.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there might not be as much of it, and the value thing is difficult to predict, but key to that, and we've talked about it already, is being noticed. If you're be an oceanic artist, not an artist. Be a modern medieval painter rather than a painter. It's finding that lane, and that identifying characteristic is your best bet at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be the advice I'd give, I think. If that
I know this is heresy to say it, but AI bores me. It's not not really interesting to me, because it is so derivative of other people's work. And I know there's a level of genius and efficiency embedded in all that. I know all that, but it still doesn't interest me. I'd rather talk to the artists themselves. I'd rather have that conversation, because we're going to discover something that hasn't existed in the conversation we're having.
Yeah. And understanding that and seeing something in that is really important. I was chatting to one of our artist members recently, and she combines abstract with landscape. It's almost two paintings in one. So she'll come out of a kind of impressionist beach scene into an abstract,
Wow.
pointillist kind of sky. And what I really enjoyed about the work that she had produced was she had unintentionally produced something I could see in that. I could see a prancing Lipizzaner horse in the dots.
Yeah.
When you do an eye test and they're different colors and you've got to find the number. It was a little bit like that. And she said, I've never seen that before. And there's a pirate there. There's a car there. And I could see things that a bit like those stereoscopic 3D things that you do. But I love the fact that I was involved with it. She painted it. She didn't intend that, but I found something in what she had produced that she couldn't see. I'm not suggesting that can't happen in AI, but it happened with hers, and it may not have been. AI cannot do anything unintentionally.
What you're describing in that painting is very similar to what I had here.
Wow. Love that.
So the sky, clouds are all very abstract,
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is a painting of the plains of Wyoming.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just, I love this.
Yeah, it's great.
And that is actually what it looks like there.
Yeah. But what's interesting with that is that the decision to make the clouds actually the predominant feature in the painting was a human decision.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't necessarily, if that's not been done before, AI won't do it.
Right.
So it's our opportunity to continue to be creative and original.
Well, if you talk with artists, that particular landscape artists, they talk about the horizon being important. And there's a film clip of John Ford, the famous director, talking to a young artist, and he points to a picture and he says, "Where's the horizon?" And the boy goes over and he's pointing at something that's in the middle. And he says, "No, that's the horizon. If you're going to create a horizon, it needs to be at the bottom or at the top." He says that's what makes it important to look at.
Yeah, yeah.
You see, that's the creative genius coming out that allows for people to be inspired by that image and then create something that has an abstract character to that. So it's great.
But the irony, just before we finish, is that every piece of genuinely original art fuels the ability of AI to replicate it.
Yeah.
Because once it's out there in the public domain, it'll be used by AI.
Sure.
And referred to. But the prompting, I do love experimenting with prompting. That's a new art form in itself. That'll probably be the word of 2024. Prompt. It's what you tell AI to get what it is you want out. And that's a poetic art in itself, which I find fascinating, and I've been experimenting with myself.
Well, if you think about that as a conversation you're having with ChatGPT, you're having a conversation. So asking the right question or providing the right prompt is really critical to getting the outcome that you want.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Well, it's also true in how we talk with people. So if just at kind of reflecting on podcasting, when both sides want to project themselves and their own egos and their own self-importance, then it becomes very boring. But when the two people engage in a real discovery of what is possible or what the other person thinks, now that's when things really are magical.
Yeah. What's that saying for salesmen? Nobody ever put the phone down when they were speaking.
So, how do people find you and find the Arts and Culture Network?
Search Arts and Culture Network will find us, especially on LinkedIn. But it's artsandculturenetwork.com for the website. If you search Arts and Culture Network or even Arts and Culture on LinkedIn and look for groups, you'll find all our 8 groups listed. They all carry the same black logo, so it's easy to find. And yeah, members joining those groups. I vet applications in most cases, so I'm afraid if you don't have a public photo on LinkedIn, if you have fewer than 10 connections, and you haven't posted yet, you're probably not coming in, I'm afraid. But otherwise, anyone with an interest is welcome, professional or otherwise.
Okay, that's good. Well, we'll put that in the show notes so people can find you, and maybe if you're an artist, join in.
Yeah.
Great. Mark, this has been fantastic. Thank you for being here. And I'm grateful for the work that you're doing for a host of reasons, not just for arts and culture, but for the model of how to network in the digital age. I think that's as significant as anything I've seen in a long time.
That's very kind, Ed. This has been a delight. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Sign up, hit the like button, but even more importantly, leave a comment, question, so that we know that you're engaged with what we're talking about, because these are important ideas and subjects that we're talking about here. It may be unscripted, but it's not unthought about. And that's the fun part of what we're doing here. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye.